Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, the students, faculty, and staff of Clinton Community College, it's an honor for me to welcome you to the Stafford Center today for this media event. And I have to say, one of the, I was just saying to some of our guests from SUNY System Administration today that I was never worried about the content of this program today, but I was terrified that we might have this big event with the guests that we have here today and we'd only get a small turnout. I am so happy that all of you have come out to show our collective community support for the work that we're doing here today. The seamless education pipeline from cradle to career in Clinton County, and your support today is evident in your numbers. Before I introduce our keynote speaker today, let me take this opportunity to acknowledge just a few other special guests. Although she is not here physically today, Assemblymember Janet Dupree, who's a member of the Assembly's Higher Ed Committee, intended to be here, except that the legislature was called into special session today, so she sends her regards and her regrets for not being able to be here in person. We also have with us today County Administrator Mike Zerlo. Our county sponsor is Clinton County, and I tell you, I've gotten to know Mike over the last 2.5 years. The best thing I can say about Mike is that he's one of the guys that when we sit and talk about Clinton Community College and education and the work that we're doing here, we talk a lot about how we can instead of why we can't. That doesn't mean that we always agree on everything or we always get everything that we wish for, but it's a pleasure to work with you, Mike, and thank you for being here today. I thought that perhaps County Legislator Bob Hines was going to be here today. He said he was going to make it, but he may not have arrived yet. So to him and the other county legislators, thank you for your support. From our Board of Trustees, Nina Coolidge, Bill Morgan, and Rolla Parker are here. So thank you, trustees, for the work that you're doing to support us and make this possible. Supervisor of the town of Plattsburgh, Bernie Bassett, is in the room today. There's Bernie. This college is situated in the town of Plattsburgh. The deputy supervisor in the town of Plattsburgh is also here, Marty Mannix. I saw him in the room. There's Marty. Thank you. The town is a great supporter of what we're doing and has been for a long time. To the point now, there are a number, and I won't call you all out by name because it's a large group, members of the Clinton County Workforce Development Roundtable, the group that you'll hear more about today. If you would, those members that were able to make it today, just stand for a moment and be recognized. Clinton County Workforce Development Roundtable. Some of them will be part of a panel discussion. We'll get a more formal introduction in a few minutes, but I'll dispense with that for the moment. This group formed because in March 2010, we brought together, in my first year as community college president, a community business summit. And out of that came two main ideas from our business community. One, that CCC is vital to the future of our community. And two, that this community college needs to take a leadership role to help advance the causes that are important to all of us. Bob Parks, John Masella, Colin Reed, and Paul Grasso were at the heart of that effort, and they're here today, and I thank them. One of the advantages of being a smaller community like this is that we all know each other. We formed quickly as a workforce development roundtable. We identified a mission and a vision for our collaborative, and as a result, I am extremely pleased today to announce that Clinton County, New York, is the first rural community in the nation to launch a Strive Cradle to Career partnership. To tell us more about Strive and the National Strive Network, we're honored to have with us again today the Chancellor of the State University of New York, Dr. Nancy Zimpher. To say that this is a huge honor for us is an understatement. Dr. Zimpher, Chancellor Zimpher, is co-founder of Strive in Cincinnati, the epicenter of this effort. That was established to holistically address the challenges across the education pipeline. Earlier this week, Chancellor Zimpher was at the White House sharing her insights with the President of the United States of America and the U.S. Secretary of Education, and today she's here at Clinton Community College. Before I read the brief formal introduction of the Chancellor's bio, let me say that one of the things that I think is quite apt is a copy of a letter that I received from outgoing SUNY trustee Carl Hayden, who referred to Chancellor Zimpher as the most dynamic leader in American public higher education. I happen to agree with those sentiments. Without further ado, Chancellor Nancy Zimpher, a nationally recognized leader in education, is SUNY's greatest champion. On June 1st, 2009, Dr. Zimpher became the 12th Chancellor of the State University of New York, bringing to the post impressive scholarship and boundless enthusiasm for the possibilities of learning that have made her a national force in areas of teacher preparation, urban education, and university-community collaborations, today's topic. Prior to SUNY, she held leadership positions University of Cincinnati, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, College of Education at Ohio State University, and at each step of her career she crafted and refined a vision of higher education that is inclusive, encourages innovation, and is rooted in addressing the most pressing needs of our nation. It's a vision that's come to SUNY in full bloom. Chancellor Zimpher hit the ground running at SUNY, immediately launching a statewide tour of the 64-campus system, and that became the starting point for the SUNY strategic plan, The Power of SUNY. The plan, developed in an unparalleled climate of collaboration in New York's college campuses and communities, is an ambitious blueprint for harnessing SUNY's potential to drive economic revitalization, to create jobs, and to build today's students into tomorrow's leaders. Please welcome with me SUNY Chancellor Nancy Zimpher.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I'm just thrilled to be back. It always causes some reflection that my first visit here was really summer one for both President Jablonski and myself. We began our tenure, he as president here at Clinton Community College and I as the Chancellor of SUNY on the same day or the same month or at the moment. And of course, neither one of us knew what we were talking about when we first toured the campus, but it has worn well, and it is truly a partnership. And I want to return the favor. This is as much an honor for the State University of New York to be here today as it is for you to have invited us. I followed that early tour visit, attending John's inaugural. I met many of you at that time. It was a beautiful day, as I recall, and an exciting day. I was back when we had an economic development conversation. Many of you were in the room. You will recall that we laid a lot of groundwork for our reciprocal and mutual work, which was and has become our absolute ambition to be a driver of the economic revitalization of the state of New York. And back recently in the neighborhood for what we call a SUNY Showcase, where we paraded all the fine work of Clinton Community College and SUNY Plattsburgh and others in the region. So I'm thinking I need a cottage or I need to rent a room here, because this is a regular and it just feels really, really good to me. I'm pleased to be traveling today with Senior Vice Chancellor for Community Colleges and the Education Pipeline. You will meet her later, Johanna Duncan-Portier. Thank you, Johanna, for your work, your partnership. Thank you very, very much. We don't travel alone, so Pat and Jill and CJ, I want to give you a shout out. These are the team of technical assistants who will help drive this first ever rural cradle to career partnership. We are in for a penny, in for a pound. We are here to help you every step of the way. I also brought my husband, Ken Howey, who is a professor at UAlbany and the Rockefeller Center, and really did a lot of the on-the-ground work with the Cradle to Career Partnership that grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Northern Kentucky. Now, oh, well, there you go, Ken. Nick Botto drove us here, so I could go on and on. I also want to acknowledge the great relationship I have personally with the president of SUNY Plattsburgh, and that's John Ettling. And I know that John and John are great partners, and I just want to thank you, John, for your leadership of SUNY Plattsburgh. And I'm getting quite familiar with the work of Gary Douglas and Paul Grasso and Adore Kurtz. I see them in many, many places. I want to give a shout out to Gary and the Chamber for your recognition this year, and to Craig King, Superintendent of Plattsburgh City. The BOCES.
BOCES District Superintendent.
Thank you. and all other academic leaders who will be joining the team to really create this seamless relationship between early childhood, K-12, post-secondary, and workforce development. It's really an incredible idea. One of the really important things that I like to do is bring some pictures, because it's usually after lunch or after dinner when I finally get to the podium, and I always need a little help. So my task in very short order is to really tell a little story about where this concept of cradle to career partnerships emerged in my own experiences in Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky, and then apply it to the work that lies ahead for you. I do want to say that I like to frame what we're doing in the context of some really big problems. These are they, best identified this way. I don't have to even fill in the numbers. It cannot last that ninth graders have such a minimal chance of college and career success. This little graphic, really 10 ninth graders, sometimes I say 100 ninth graders, doesn't matter. It is wholly unacceptable that only 2 or less than 20% of all ninth graders will make it to the academic post-secondary finish line. It's a graphic that I think should guide our thinking as a point forward. You're going to be learning more about the statistical, the data, the demographics of your region and the student success or dropout and attrition, but this is what we're driving at, changing this graphic. I threw in as well that we have as many leaks in the teacher pipeline as we do in the student pipeline. And in 3 years or less, teachers who serve in rural and urban communities will drop out at a rate of 50%. We can't keep training teachers, preparing teachers for work that either they feel incapable of managing, are not supported, or walk away from our career. And then I think another problem we have is that we don't really have a system of public education in America. We actually regulate early childhood in a very different way than we regulate K-12, than we regulate higher education, and there again, workforce development. Think how many federal agencies and state agencies have their hand in this work, and it's not connected. You have an opportunity here in Clinton County, Plattsburgh, here in the eastern coast of the North Country to really put this system of education together. So what happened in Strive? Let me give you a little geography lesson first. Cincinnati is in the southwest corner of the state of Ohio. It is adjacent to the state of Kentucky, separated only by the Ohio River, which I can't tell you how many times I had to say was not the Great Wall of China. So it is so hard to eclipse political, geographical, jurisdictional boundaries. But this effort, which we ultimately named Strive, we wanted to call it Thrive, but Procter & Gamble used the word thrive, and so they put a little embargo on that word, so we just skipped on over to Strive. What we did when these people came together. Now, what's important about this slide? These are Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, indigenous businesses, higher education, K-12, social service agencies, philanthropists. But what I've learned about moving around the country is that soon we will have a slide for Clinton County and Plattsburgh, and you will all be there. You have in common with this idea that emerged 4 or 5 years ago in Cincinnati, that it takes all these people to create the kind of cradle to career partnership that we are talking about today. But like all big ideas, it really started here. Look again when you leave a conference at what got written down on the napkin, because it may turn out to be really, really important. This discussion, which they claim occurred in a local bar some hours after we had said in a group of all those logos you saw on the previous slide, we have got to do something about the student attrition in our community, and we need some kind of a roadmap to tell us what to do. And so this little napkin became this, what appears to be somewhat complicated roadmap, but let me tell you, it is easily unpacked. It is, as we would have called in the olden days before a GPS, it's the AAA triptych. It's cradle, and some would say prenatal, attention to early childhood all the way through post-secondary success and career placement. And the top, in the reddish frame, is all the research about where we must exercise the most leverage to ensure academic success. And in the purple shaded area, we all know that it can't all be done in schools. It is about family, it is about neighborhood, it is about community, it is about before and after school, it is coming to school healthy and ready to learn. So this is the roadmap that Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky created, and what I like about this slide is that eventually Richmond, Virginia, Houston, Texas, Portland, Oregon, San Francisco East Bay, and Seattle, Washington have created their own roadmap. And in fact, we now have a website where there's a section on it called Build Your Own Roadmap. And that's what you will be doing from cradle through career. And what we all have to decide collectively is where we can make the greatest difference in the greatest attrition in our pipeline. It might be for you bringing kids to kindergarten ready to learn, which, in my view, we play catch up every day that we don't bring kids to kindergarten ready to learn. It's not like taking an SAT to get into kindergarten, but there are certain signs that say children are ready to do schoolwork. The same could be said of 3rd and 8th grade tests, the transition from middle school to high school, the attrition I have shown you from 9th grade through college. So collective impact, what works for kids, I guess I'd say, not just what works for adults. I think I reached a point a couple of years ago when if one more person said to me, it's about the children, I would just, cave, because it's so often about the adults. So it's got to be about the kids and how they are progressing in the education pipeline. And then I pause on this one particularly. We don't have millions of dollars to buy our way out of student attrition. There are a few examples around the country, most notably the Harlem Children's Zone, where massive investment is moving the dial. What we have is our own hands at work. We have a United Way, we have a YMCA, we have a Boys and Girls Club, we have philanthropists, we have donors, we have corporate foundations, we have business and industry, we have school districts, early childhood providers, and we have 2- and 4-year institutions. And what we really need to do is reinvent the way we do our work. So what's so novel about the way Strive figured out how to do its work? Well, this isn't where we started. This is a little framework that 4 or 5 years later, when we took a step back in Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky, we kind of figured out that these 4 pillars are what enables us to have that collective impact and to do our work, to put our collective shoulder to the wheel to make sure every child succeeds, no exception. So if I were to unpack this, I'll start with shared community vision. What I understand you've been doing over the last several months, since, say, September, and maybe earlier in nascent conversations you are having, you are creating a common table of all the key stakeholders. One room, one place where you put on the table what the challenge is and what the vision is for educating the North Country, Clinton County, Metro Plattsburgh, whatever you determine to be your geographic span, with the full acknowledgement that the distribution in rural areas where you don't have the critical mass is as challenging as the density of an urban setting. And let's face it, urban and rural education experience many of the same challenges, just a different context. So in forming a table where all the key stakeholders come together and hammer out a vision, you will have taken the critical first step. I also say at this point, I'm kind of with Woody Allen. Showing up is 80% of the job. So people always say to me, oh my gosh, you're so busy. Someone told me once, keep the myth alive. Whether or not you are so busy, if you are perceived to be so busy, you have the opportunity to say, if I can find the time in my calendar, you can find the time in yours. And one superintendent actually accused me, having been a teacher most of my life, that I would take roll. And you know, I kind of do. If we're going to fix this problem together with collective impact, we need that common convening, and we need to get work done. Now, eventually, you will charge yourself with a set of strategic roles. This happens to be Cincinnati, prepared for school, supported in and out of school, succeeds, enrolls in college, and graduates from college into a career. But this is what Houston is doing. Here's their roadmap. Looks quite a bit different than the one I showed you, but there is this progression from cradle to career. And they talk about social and emotional welfare, physical, supported by family and community to enable the academic agenda. This is Bridging Richmond. Notice this, they're all called something different. This in Houston is the All Kids Alliance. In Richmond, it's a City of Bridges, Bridging Richmond. This is Seattle. They haven't quite named themselves yet, but don't you see the forward movement from cradle to career and the ambitious goals and strategic activities they have set for themselves? This is the responsibility of that pillar about collective vision. Then there's this evidence-based pillar. The point we are making here, we are like 1,000 points of light. It isn't that everybody in this community is not doing something good to help move the dial. But from our experience, it is largely disaggregated. Sometimes I call higher education, John and John, a house for the cottage industries we produce. We have hundreds of projects that serve the community, that serve K-12, that serve early childhood, often not committed. The magic of evidence-based decision-making is that we hold each other accountable, that what we're doing really is moving the dial. Maybe the best example is mentoring and tutoring. How many mentors and tutors are floating around this community trying to do something to help students progress? Is it what the teachers need done? Is it related to the homework assignments? Can the parents help and be supporters? Is the time you have with the child the right time of day? All the questions that, quite frankly, help us keep focused on the agenda. And eventually, and I know that John and the team are working on this, put out a data set to the community that said, here's a picture of where we are. Is this satisfactory? I already know you have collectively said no, we can do better. And by sharing data, common data sets, data aggregated from the same sources and decision rules. You know, some have said data is very political. You can find a way to use data almost any way you want. But when you're at a table of 30 and you have to agree on freshman to sophomore retention in the post-secondary institutions in this community, you got to have the same rules for generating the data. So that's a second critical pillar, the third of which is collective and collaborative action. And by this I mean, if you were to itemize the numerous early childhood service agencies and caregivers in this community, including Head Start, including one of the typical pillars of the United Way, which is early childhood or Success by 6, if you put them all in the room, a room, and threw away the key and said, don't bother to even ask to come out until you have put all your wares on the table, submitted them to are these evidence-based interventions, and come out of that room ready to do the 1 or 2 or 3 interventions that you know work. That's what collaborative action is all about. We had to pull on our manufacturers in Cincinnati from GE and from Toyota to do Six Sigma to learn how to do this. This is not indigenous in our DNA. It is an acquired skill to stick with the data and to determine interventions that work. So I could go through this roadmap to say, you got to get all the post-secondary people driving in the same direction, the early childhood givers, the transition from 8th to 9th grade. We are learning you can't just start at 12th grade if college success is your goal. You have to back it up, and we have to organize people and groups around this work. So this is, we actually ended up with black belts, green belts, white belts, Six Sigma, if you're familiar with it, and I'm sure you are. You have many manufacturers in the region. Maybe they can help train you in how to ensure that evidence is driving your agenda. And by the way, we at Strive National are positioned to deliver technical assistance to you to help you with these aspects of this initiative. And then ultimately, organizing investments in the direction wherein those people who are capable of philanthropic contributions, be they individual or a local foundation or a corporate foundation, help them see that their best investment is to invest in an evidence-based strategy that will give them a better return on their investment. So what you have are a governance structure which you will derive, where all the stakeholders will be at the table. It is true that you'll need what has been called a backbone staff, people who wake up every day concerned about the Clinton County Cradle to Career initiative. I don't think John or Gary can pile this on your existing work. We're going to try to help you find funding. Being that you're the first rural community to embrace this framework, we hesitate to call it a model because, as you can see, you've got to find your own way through these strategies. We want to help you attract funding. In fact, we want to help you close the gaps in the education pipeline. We want to help draw national attention to this phenomenal Albany to Montreal corridor, and to help you draw attention to the fine work that you are doing as a collectivity. You join a number of cities across the country who are organically designing their own roadmap and their own Cradle to Career partnership. I hope that you hear how proud we are that you have embraced this agenda, how much we intend to be helpful and offer technical assistance to you, how we intend to go shopping for some of those philanthropic funds, and how we intend to put you on the national roadmap for those cities who understand that collective impact really lives right at home with each of us. These are some of the cities. I've named a few of them. I can tell you that recently Strive National, the Strive National Network for Cradle to Career Partnerships held a convening in Portland, Oregon, and 83 cities sent representation, a couple of which were actually rural in nature, but none has gotten to the starting line as fast and as promising as you have right here in Clinton County. So that's my story. My role was to lay the groundwork and then turn it right back over to your team. John, thank you. Thank you.
Of course, the Chancellor and I are educational administrators at different levels. I thought it would be important for us today to hear from three people who represent in Clinton County the private sector. So the first of those three is Gary Douglas. Gary Douglas, while he's coming up, let me say this. One of the quotes, and he often has a quote, is if you want to punch above your weight, attach yourself to something bigger and figure out how you can make a contribution to it. I think that's fitting today as we join ourselves with something bigger in the National Strive Network. Gary, your comments, please.
Okay. You're going to think this is my Winston Churchill day, because some of you were in a gathering earlier this morning where I spoke and quoted Churchill, but it's going to be a different quote for those of you that were there. So Churchill tells us that one person with belief is worth 99 who only have an interest. And clearly that's true of our good friend Nancy. She is a person brimming over with belief. She believes in the transformational power of education. She believes in the transformational power of SUNY and the SUNY system, including its community colleges. And she clearly believes in the North Country because she keeps coming back here and she seems to like us. and believes in the power of what we're doing here and the opportunities to hook that up with the other forms of power that she talks about. Churchill also told us that the most important thing about education is appetite. And I think much of what the challenges and opportunities, every challenge is an opportunity, but much of what the challenges are in the things that we talk about, the hurdles within the pipeline that we need to get over or bring those hurdles down so they don't exist at all, has to do with appetite. It has to do with developing an appetite for education as a source of transformational power in that individual's life from very early on. And frequently, I think you mentioned the similarities in many ways between often poor metro areas and rural areas. I think it's that appetite is not instilled in the household and in the family from early on, and that may be one of the greatest challenges of all. Is that well-meaning, fine families, but without a strong educational background themselves, kind of struggling in life, don't always necessarily convey what the opportunities are or the right kinds of supports for that child growing up to develop an opportunity that's at a higher level than their parents had. Sometimes they do, but too often they don't. We need to attract, in the context of business and economic development, clearly the clearest way, I was going to say easiest, but there's nothing easy about it. The clearest way to increase appetite is to have good jobs. You increase everybody's appetite, the family member's appetite, who then sees more for their child to aspire to and to push them forward to. Teachers' appetites to believe that they're preparing somebody for jobs and seeing tangible results in their community, whatever. But it's always kind of a chicken and egg. What comes first, the good jobs or the good education pipeline that's there to support the job? And they both have to happen simultaneously. One really can't be done and then do the other after you do the first. So there really is no sequential pathway to that. I know Dory will agree with me that in the economic development game today, if you're going back 20 years ago, you talked about sites, and you talked about your sewer lines, and you talked about your water line, and you talked about the new road, or you talked about the state incentives that were there. Fact is, everybody has those now. If you don't, you aren't in the game to begin with, so forget about it. Everybody has those. So the playing field is a lot more level, that the defining difference now is more likely to be what's your workforce. And particularly in a rural area, that's really challenging because your numbers in and of themselves make it difficult to aspire to exciting new things that may have strong demands, particularly larger numbers than what you've been accommodating before. So if you're going to be in transportation and aerospace, I mean, that question really becomes, it all looks good, great airport, great site, great community, like the incentives. You want to explain to us again how it is you're going to meet our workforce needs, because we're kind of not confident on that. And therein lies the challenge that I think endeavors like Strive can help us address, is you need the pipeline to work so that it works, but you also need it there so it's seen to be something that's working, so that prospective investor, that prospective company, that existing company that's making its decisions within its corporation of what's going to stay open, where functions are going to be, believes that this is a community that's going to meet their current needs and their future needs and their changing needs. So we look forward to the conversation, and as I always say, onward and upward. John.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Paul Grasso, and while Paul is on the way to the podium, let me just point out, many of you were in the room when Paul introduced an idea that we had a panel discussion about in an hour-long format, 7 characteristics of a community with a competitive advantage. And I think, again, it relates well to the comments Gary just made and the work that we're doing as a new Strive partner here. So without further ado, Paul Grasso, Executive Director of the Workforce Investment Board.
For the next 6 months, anyway. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. We're really excited about Strive. We're really excited about the cradle to career aspect of it. I think it's important to recognize the link between workforce development, economic development, and education. I mean, those three things are so closely linked, especially in small communities. And I keep saying workforce development, economic development are opposite sides of the same coin, but it can't exist without education. One of the things that concerns me most is the achievement gap. You know, the disparity in test scores between peer groups. And it's most common in urban areas, but it exists here as well. And closing that achievement gap, I think, is one of the most pressing problems that we're facing in our communities. I mean, the societal impacts of that in communities where education is becoming so critical to being able to get a job that pays a self-sustaining wage, as the fastest growing demographics in the country begin falling farther and farther behind, you could just see the income disparities, the need for more and more social services from governments that can't provide them. The societal impacts are just enormous. I think we need to engage people sooner in the education process. And that's why I really like the Cradle part of this. We, unfortunately, in the Workforce Investment Board, by the time we get to engage young people, because of the legislative requirements, they're so far behind educationally that the damage is almost irreparable sometimes. So engaging them early, instilling in them the importance of education is actually a critical component of this. We see people come in and take the TABE test, the test of adult basic education, and we're thrilled if you have 22-year-olds who can score at the 8th grade level in reading and math. I mean, that's a good score for us, so it really becomes important. Alvin Toffler, the futurist, once said that the illiterate of the 21st century are not going to be people who can't read and write. They're going to be people who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. And if you're starting so far behind, the unlearning and relearning becomes even more critical. But what we find among the young people we deal with is that education has no value. They just don't see the importance of it. So you can change the schools, you can change the teachers, you can change the curriculum, but if people don't see what you're offering as having value, then you're really not going to be very successful either. So instilling in young people that value is really important. I don't have children, which my staff tells me every day is probably a good decision on my part. But my understanding is trying to modify behavior in teenagers can be challenging. So if we can instill in them the values that we need them to have at a younger age, having them relearn or begin to recognize the importance as they get older becomes less and less of a challenge. So I really liked the 5 goals of ensuring that young people are prepared for school, that they're supported in and out of school. That is absolutely so critical, that they succeed academically, that they enroll in some sort of post-secondary training, and that they actually graduate and enter a career is just really critical for us, and it's something I think that we're going to embrace at the Workforce Investment Board. So we're happy to be part of this, and we're looking forward to moving forward with it. So thank you very much.
And the third and final in our series of speakers is the president of the Development Corporation here in Clinton County, also the current chairwoman of the New York State Economic Development Council, and I'm referring, of course, to Adori Flynn Kurtz. And there's a quote I saw on the New York State Economic Development Council. Again, I think it's relevant to today's topic. The quote is, or the slogan is, that the New York State Economic Development Council, that Adori is chair of, is New York's growth, the slogan is, New York's growth is our business. And I think that aligns very nicely with the 6 big ideas and the power of SUNY. So appropriately, Adori, you're bringing it home for us today.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here today and to talk about the asset that Strive can become for our community. I think we've all heard and embraced the sense and the ideas of lifetime learning. But the concept of cradle to career, not cradle to grave, cradle to career, is much more dynamic than that. And I think it really has the potential to have more compelling effects for us here in the North Country. One of those most exciting things, and it's probably different from some of the things that the other people think are important, I really think the data portion is really important. Now, I'm sure there are many of you who think, data, you know, what about this accountability measurement thing? We hear so many times in the media that perhaps school districts don't like that, and that teaching professionals don't like that. But from an economic development point of view, this is a really important concept. Most of the people who will begin to consider our area to grow their business and to expand their business will see and look at data on the web. They will be doing all kinds of things ahead of ever calling us or ever planning to even know where Plattsburgh is. So the fact that this is a program that really helps students, helps employers, and helps other folks is excellent. But the fact that it can provide for us the thing that we need to make our value proposition a compelling one is really important. So I, as an economic developer, and I look at it and I see many of the people who sit on our board of directors, who worked for us in the past, I think that, you know, it's such a positive for us. So while I don't think of myself as a real technocrat, I'm becoming a much better data lover, and my professor from graduate school would be so proud of me these days. So with Strive, we inaugurate what I think is really going to be a comprehensive community effort on our part that is going to provide job access for our residents, but also upward mobility in jobs for people here in the community already, and job satisfaction for both employers and employees, people who are prepared for the work that they do, that have the ability to do a good job. These are key for satisfaction on the part of both employers and employees. And I think the fact that we have educational institutions here in our community who are committed really up the ante. They allow us to have a much higher potential for success. I look around, I see so many school district folks that we've worked with over the many years, people from the Clinton Community College, the folks at BOCES, the folks at Plattsburgh State. I think with a team like that, I think we really have the potential to do an excellent job and really be very successful. And it never hurts to be a successful pilot, so onward.
You can stay right here on stage because the panel is next. We're on to the last 15 minutes of the program, just trying to catch up a little bit on the few minutes we lost at the beginning. Adori is joining us on stage for the panel discussion. I would invite Gary and Paul to join us back on stage as our three private sector representatives. Chancellor, please join us on stage. And let me introduce two other colleagues that you heard mentioned before, but didn't get a proper introduction until this point. John Ettling is president of SUNY Plattsburgh, a great mentor, a friend, and a colleague here in the Plattsburgh area, Clinton County. John, please join us as an educational sector representative on stage. And also, in a different part of the educational sector, I'm pleased to reintroduce to you Craig King. Craig is the district superintendent for Champlain Valley Education Services and has been a great partner and supporter with us in this workforce development roundtable. I will join the panel and I will introduce the moderator for the panel, who I think will take questions from the audience and perhaps pose a few questions of her own. Approaching the podium now is Johanna Duncan-Poitier. Johanna was hired in SUNY shortly after Chancellor Zimpher began as the Chancellor's deputy for the Seamless Education Pipeline, and subsequently has taken on the additional role of Senior Vice Chancellor for Community Colleges. Johanna, thank you for being here today, and the microphone and the podium are yours now to conduct the panel discussion.
Thank you so much. And John, I think you're joining the panel.
That's correct.
So first, because we are going to be trying to make up time, I'm going to use my outside voice. You can all hear me very well, and I hope you all will do the same. We decided that maybe to put mics on all of us might be a little bit too much. Because we want to make up time, you're going to hear very little from me, I just would like to make 3 points. And then each of you are going to respond to some questions. Those of you who had an opportunity to speak already will only get 2. And those of you who did not have an opportunity to speak will get 3. But don't worry, they'll be easy. The first thing, but I hope you studied, no. The first thing I'd like to just say is thank you. Thank you so very much, all of you, everyone in this room. This is such an exciting day. I know you heard the enthusiasm in the Chancellor's voice, as well as in her presentation, but everything she's saying is just so true. It is incredible to have so many talented people all willing to work at the same table. You've been doing this work for a while. This isn't rocket science. This isn't a brand new idea, but you're bringing together the talent collectively to make a difference for so many students from cradle to career, so more students graduate from high school prepared to succeed in college and the workforce. The second, I'd just like to say how exciting it is to be in Clinton County. The last time I was here on the stage, there was the issue you were bringing in a new mechanism that I don't know the exact name on it, but it was with the wind turbine. Simulator, but it was something else fancy with the floaton or the something. I don't know. Anyway. Okay, so you didn't.
I remember where it was.
Thank you. It was very, very impressive. But actually, these are probably the last 2 points I'll make to wrap it up. Is one of the things that I think is so important, and the Chancellor certainly alluded to it as well. When we talk about the challenges in education, the challenges in education are the same, whether you're in Harlem, whether you're in Rochester, Buffalo, or here in Clinton County. The difference is when you hear leaders, including the President who spoke with the Chancellor just this week, I think that's so hot, but when you hear leaders talk about changing education and having a better educated workforce, they're almost always talking about what needs to happen in our urban communities. They don't all understand, as we do, how important it is to make a difference in our rural communities. In some cases, it's easier in the urban areas. You have children who can see the Empire State Building. They can see hope. In the rural areas, when it's difficult to commute from one part of town to another, they don't always see hope. Sometimes they don't see the other side of the mountain. So for you to embrace this and to be the first in the nation to say cradle to career is important for really having an educated workforce is just awesome. And you know how excited the Chancellor is when they start to talk about Houston, Texas, and they talk about Napa Valley, California. They're going to talk about Clinton County, New York. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I applaud all of you. Come on, work with me. All right, thank you. So with that, first question. So Craig, you didn't have an opportunity to share your thoughts. I would like to say that, and I don't want to mispronounce your name, but Adori, Adori, you did a magnificent job sharing with us the importance of collecting data as well as job satisfaction and really having students understand what the future is all about. And Paul, you did a terrific job in terms of an educated workforce. And I really loved, Gary, I loved your quote about one person who believes is, I know it's Winston Churchill, but it'll be yours today. Wonderful, wonderful quote, so thank you for that. So Craig, you didn't have an opportunity to share why this is important to you. Would you be willing to share with the group why it is?
First, let me say it's a pleasure to see you. Johanna was my boss in past life, and she's just outstanding to work with, and so nice to have you here today. I'd also like to thank John. John, it's your vision and your leadership that has led us here today, and I appreciate it. You're developing an outstanding legacy, and I'm so proud of that. You actually started the conversation with comparing urban areas to rural areas, and we had a moment to chat prior to this meeting in regards to the issues surrounding both. And I've had the good fortune of working in an urban area, and I can relate to what you're saying, that most of the time there's more attention in an urban area, there are more dollars and maybe more opportunities. In a rural area, you deal with some of the same issues in regards to trying to improve student achievement. You also deal with sparsity issues, as you've alluded to, and also poverty, which many people don't actually see until you spend some time in rural areas. However, I would like to say that the people in this room, the leaders in this room, have turned those challenges into opportunities. I've been here for 14 years and had the opportunity to live in various parts of the state and have never seen the collaboration that I have seen here. And there is, I could probably say everyone in this room, although I can't see all of you because the lights are in my eyes, but have helped CVES, which is the school that I work for, and improving student achievement in one way or the other. So the collaborative efforts are incredible and phenomenal, and have turned into a strength for the area. And because of that strength, this is the perfect place, in my opinion, to be able to start this Cradle to Career initiative.
Thank you so much, Craig. That's perfect, and thank you for your kind remarks. I appreciate it very much. And so now to the John and John. SUNY, the power of SUNY.
You make sure that the Chancellor knows that we're so far ahead on shared services that we share our first names.
I will share that with her. So I'm gonna save you for last before we get to the second difficult question. So John, president of the University of Plattsburgh.
Yep.
Why? Why are you involved in this? What difference does it make? Why don't we just have the best prepared student come to the University of Plattsburgh and not worry about all this mess?
Well, okay, let me maybe back up a few years to an aha moment that's relevant to this conversation. And there I was in Shanghai a few years ago with a small group of American college and university presidents in a room with some of our Chinese counterparts, talking about differences in our systems and things we had to deal with. And the aha moment came when one of the American presidents asked the Chinese, well, what are you all doing to contend with or to deal with the dropout, the attrition rate? They had no idea what we were talking about. It just doesn't happen there. You start in school and say, well, it's easy enough to say, well, in a totalitarian state, you can order people to do things like stay in school or major in this instead of that. But that wasn't the reason. That was something else. And it got me thinking that so much of what I've been raised over the years to think of as our responsibility is university faculty in a four-year college or university is to serve as gatekeepers in some way, to control access to not just job markets but to professions and so forth, to separate sheep from goats and only send the sheep forward. And increasingly, after I thought about that meeting in China, I've come to see our role as facilitators and enablers. We, as a society, with our 300 million people, seems like a lot, but it's not compared to China. We can't afford the carnage that a sloppy and careless educational. It's not just lack of coordination between and among the various components. It's also that mindset that education is available to everybody, and it's their faults if for some reason they don't take advantage of it and move on. We can't afford that human waste.
Thank you. What a powerful story. Thank you so much, John. And so to the other part of shared services, and it's interesting. I hadn't planned on saying it. I think everyone has seen some of the press coverage about how SUNY is looking to share services. But honestly, this Strive initiative is about sharing services. It's about everyone working towards a common goal, towards the same end. And so John Jablonski, president of Clinton Community College, you've been quite invested in this, and you've been at this for about 14 months, and what you don't know is he's had lots of conversations with all of us, and he said, you know, we really got to get this. I know we can do this. I know we can do this in our part of town, because the folks I work with, I'm sorry to embarrass you, but the folks I work with are dedicated, committed, and they get this. This isn't going to be hard. I will tell you, I'm very proud to be here today and to see this come alive. So why? Why do this?
Well, one of the things that we realized, I think all realized individually, and the conversation, you know, sort of converged, is that this isn't just about the preparedness of students that come through the door as college freshmen. This isn't just about the number of students who drop out of high school before they graduate. This isn't just about what happens in middle school that turns on switches that determine whether students see themselves as college material or not college material. This is not about any one of those things. This is about all of those things. And what happens at one point in the pipeline determines things that happen at a later point in the pipeline. The point of all that is not any one of us can solve that magnitude of a problem, that scope of a problem. Only all of us working together can bring about the systemic and holistic change that's required for us to change that graph that the Chancellor showed, where only 2 out of 10, 20 out of 100 go from the 9th grade to a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree. And I'm pleased to say that the people who are here on stage, the people who are here in the audience, get that. That's one of the hallmarks of our community, the idea that working together we can accomplish more than any of us could accomplish working on our own.
Thank you so much. So here's the second question for each and every one of you, and just to briefly, if you would share with the collective, a lot of the folks that are here are your partners, and you're speaking on their behalf, but also for those who aren't. If each one of you would just quickly tell us what you bring to the table, just to show the power of this collective. And we'll start with you, Adori.
Well, I think I'd start by saying I am a former educator, and I, as a parent, have seen my own children go through various educational systems, and so I think I'm committed to the future of our community and our country. That's what. If you don't empower those young people, you know, we're not on the road that we need to be on.
Perfect. Thank you.
The Workforce Investment Board, I think what we bring to the table is we have a 38-member board, community leaders throughout 4 counties in the region. I think the other thing we bring to the table is actually money. We've got about $2 million.
Money's good.
Yeah,
Like
money is
money.
good. We have about $2 million.
Never hear that? Money.
And I think what we need to do a much better job of is with the resources we have is figuring out what we need to be doing with those resources and dwindling resources. I don't think people realize that in 1978, Department of Labor spent $17 billion on employment and training. To keep pace with inflation, in 2010, they would have had to spend $54 billion. They spent $6.
Wow.
And that's, you know, so you have this tremendous gap in funding, but you also, we do have resources, and I think what we bring to the table is expertise. We bring employment and training, we bring staff, and what we need is how can we utilize those dollars more effectively.
Fantastic. Gary?
Personally, I'm just a has-been politician, but or never was. The chamber, however, is a broad and deep network of the business and employer community, so that connectivity with the employers is certainly something that we bring to the table. I think we bring a lot of credibility with that community when we kind of set a direction or indicate that something needs to be taken seriously or there needs to be engagement. I think there's a good response to that we've built over the years. And I think we bring a demonstrable strategic sense of how to get things done, and in terms of the overarching strategic economic opportunities in this region as a framework within which you're looking to build those opportunities and that appetite.
Perfect. Thank you. John?
What does SUNY Plattsburgh bring to the table?
Or you?
Or me? Let me talk about the school. I mean, we've been around in this community for 122 years, and we've been in workforce training for that long. That is, I was pleased to see that when the Chancellor was giving her presentation, her slides, she also mentioned that that the dropout rate among school teachers is at least as great a challenge as dropout rate among students, and that's our niche. That's not the only thing we do, but that's one of the things that we do well. The Dean of our School of Education, Mike Morgan, is sitting out there. I think we can prepare teachers who can then go out in the school districts in Clinton County and in addition to whatever it is they're teaching, they can also inculcate in their students a sense of expectations, not what they can expect to get from the system, but what the various levels of education expect them to bring with them when they come, and demystify it at the same time.
Perfect.
So nurses, school teachers, and working closely with these guys. Our relationship with Clinton is good. We take their transfer students and happily do so, because they've worked out an awful lot of the adolescent angst, and we get them. They know what they want, and they know why they're there, and they're well prepared.
Fantastic. Thanks, John. Craig?
My job consists of two parts. One part is being a representative for the State Education Department. And the State Education Department has actually made major contributions to this initiative. And one of them is the Common Core Learning Standards, which were created to have all high school students prepared for college and or careers in a globally competitive 21st century. And I think that's powerful, because that's actually one of the goals that we're striving to achieve here. The other role is my district superintendent had at Champlain Valley Educational Services, in which we provide career and technical education to students and adults, and also offer other services and programs to students and school districts.
Thank you so much, Craig. And John?
In a word, I would say boundary spanner. Clinton Community College connects a lot of the parts that the other panelists here represent. Craig and I are connected personally, and our institutions are connected, and that connects the higher education sector with the Commissioner of Education and what's going on in the New York State Department of Ed. John and I have both talked about already how we articulate, and our students benefit from that articulation. I sit on the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce and the Development Corporation, and so their private sector interests help to inform the things that we're doing in the education sector. And Paul Grasso, in his role as Executive Director of the WIB, helps to fund a lot of the educational and training programs that we have here. So Clinton Community College is nicely situated as a boundary spanner or a connector of all of the other parts of the community that are represented here today.
Perfect. They did not know that question in advance, but I will tell you, you've just given us the most powerful example of why this matters. Boundary spanner, that's exactly what we need, because we do have to cross the many boundaries. You, Craig, are bringing us the kids, and you're working with all of the component school districts to make it happen. Understanding the clinical-based needs of our teachers, of our social workers, of our psychologists, so when we graduate students, they have a clue about the people with whom they will be working. Having an understanding of contacts and strategic ways of working with different people, very, very important. An educator, a parent, Common Core. This is the power of Strive here in Clinton Community. Thank you so much. I have one more question. We're going to open it up to any questions that may be here from the group. But we talked about the collective, we talked about the model. There's so much we could talk. I mean, each of you were very, very modest in terms of what you bring to the table in your respective institutions. Is there something else that those who are here today should know? You don't have to all answer if you don't wish to, but did we miss something? Is there something else that the press should know, that the Chancellor should know, that any one of us, and I just want to repeat again, the Chancellor mentioned it, and I shared it with you last night, John, in our afternoon phone call, came out wrong, we shared in our conversation yesterday, we are prepared to provide technical assistance. Jill, CJ, Pat, we will help you get to the next step, and you will be shopping for dollars. But what else? What else did we miss? Anything else that should be?
Earlier this morning, John and I were sitting at a table at another event, and we talked a little bit about our regional economic development plan.
Yes.
And how we here in this community need to provide all along that educational continuum multiple entry points for people who get off the train and need to come back. And I think that's really an important thing.
Perfect. Anyone else?
I would quote Ed Harris from Apollo 13 that failure isn't an option.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Ditto?
Ditto.
Okay. Don?
No.
Craig?
I would just repeat the collaboration here is phenomenal, which includes everyone here in the audience. They would all have stories to tell about working together. And is Mike Zerlo here? Mike Zerlo?
I think he slipped out, but
Oh,
he
he
was
slipped
here.
out? Okay, I'll tell him, I'll remind him that he slipped out. The county's also been,
Now
the county's also been phenomenal.
Terrific. And John?
The only thing I would say, I said earlier, this really had its beginnings in that community business summit and the private sector. We educators are sort of picking up the ball and carrying it, but the business community is the one that said, we need you to step in and do this kind of work.
Well, as I turn to the audience, I will just share it with an example of some of the other Strive-like networks we have around the country. And the business, I'm glad you mentioned the business and the importance of the business community. In Malta, New York, we also have an Albany Cradle to Career Connection, AKA Strive. And we're working with a big business, as you are, Laurentian Aerospace. We're working with Global Foundries. And when we spoke with them and we said, you know, how many students do you think you need? Or how many students could we engage in a co-op-like experience? Thinking, you know, maybe they'd say, you know, 10, 20, maybe 30. The answer was, how many can you give us? This is really about the future of our economy for our state as well as for our neighborhood. So failure not being an option. Any questions anyone has of any of us, any of the panel members, or just anything in general? Yes, sir.
You had a very dramatic slide which showed those enrollment figures, the dropout numbers, and at the various stages. Was that slide representative of national or state standards, or those are numbers?
It's a great question. It's New York State's numbers, and those 100 students represent 225,000 students in the state of New York. So at the end of the day, less than 25,000 make it to graduation with a 2-year degree in 3 years, or a 4-year degree in 6, but in New York State.
I think as you go forward here, it's going to be important to have our numbers. That will make it more significant to the audiences that you're going to be showing this.
Very powerful. I will just say that you will find that your numbers for Clinton County, because we did do a little background work, are probably better than some communities. You have about an 80% graduation rate, which is phenomenal in comparison to some neighborhoods. But if it's your child or your neighbor who is not graduating, it's not a phenomenal number. Because what about the 20% who aren't graduating, and or what about the students who are graduating but aren't prepared to do college work? SUNY spends $70 million in remediation a year, $70 million. How much better could those dollars be used for workforce development as well as scholarships and other things? Other questions? One? Thank you.
What is your opinion on how our workforce is as far as being ready to go out and take over? If we have a wrench come in, where do we stand?
Paul's probably a good answer.
Well, back in April 2010, we had a Connecting Business Education in the Community Summit in Lake Placid. And we sent out surveys to educators and to the business community. And one of the questions we asked that was common to both of them, how prepared do you think your students are to enter the workforce? And it was about students entering the workforce. It wasn't about students going to college. And the numbers were almost inverted. It was, the school said about 89%, and the businesses said about 11%.
Wow.
And neither the educators nor the businesses had any answer that was highly prepared. It was highly prepared and prepared. So I think it really is questionable how prepared they are. You know, and it's what they're learning. It doesn't mean they haven't learned anything, but is what business is looking for are what they're learning. The State Chamber of Commerce in California a couple of years ago did a survey about high school diplomas. And what the businesses said is that the largest businesses did not look at a high school diploma as an indication of academic achievement. They saw it as a student's willingness to stick something through to the end. So.
Powerful, thank you. One more question, anyone? Yes?
I guess I would ask the panel if they have any thoughts. I volunteer on the National Workforce Readiness Council. You know, one of the things that we talk about at times is how to engage the students. It's a different demographic. There's a lot of distractions. To give a student an option of playing a video game for 4 hours or working on homework, guess what they're going to do? So I guess the question is, how do we impact that? Are there ideas of how to get that thirst, get the desire to become, as Paul had said, you know, willing to learn, unlearn, and relearn? Because that's what, you know, seems to be needed.
If you figure out how to do that with an 11-year-old girl, let me know, okay?
But I guess maybe I don't see those things as necessarily mutually exclusive. And I think there are some creative ways to take that attraction to spending time doing one thing and learning something else together. And I think good educators are well prepared to do that and getting more well prepared all the time.
I think what you're talking about is some of the ways education needs to change. I was at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, and they have a huge video game area, basically, and it happened to be the day that every urban kid in Texas was in the place. So, but they were all, you can compete on these computers against one another. And these were kids that they weren't the best and the brightest, I'll just say that. But one of the games, it was an Indiana Jones type game. You had to go out and collect these little artifacts and get them back to the base camp. Whoever did the most in the shortest amount of time, they won. But they were working together as groups. And so you had to jump over rivers that had alligators in them and on. And as you listen to them, they were talking, and every obstacle you got 3 chances to succeed. And they were talking about, no, you've got to get them to run faster, jump sooner, jump. They were talking about physics, basically, but they had no idea that they were talking about it. And I think that's part of it. How do you incorporate the way they learn into what we need to teach? I think in some instances, they teach math and science the same way they taught it back to me.
Yeah.
And it's,
Yeah,
it was
and my
hard then.
daughter's reaction is, it's stupid, I can do that on my phone, I can do that, you know. Why do I need to do this in my head, why do I need to do this on paper? They can't
So how do
relate
you
why.
engage them differently, I think? You know, engaging them in their culture around things that they appreciate rather than what we try to force.
I've never seen, maybe you have, but I've never seen a blasé or turned off first grader. They're always excited. They are, you know, they're born wanting to know, to learn. At some point, the light goes off, right? When does that happen? Why does it happen? What can we do as educators, as trainers of teachers, to keep that light on all the way through?
Well, John, there was
that appetite you were talking.
John, there was a study at Harvard back in the early 70s where they tested kindergarten children with the same test that NASA uses to test astronauts in science on creativity. 98% of them tested highly creative. By the time they were 10 years old, it was 25%. And then they applied the same test to 25 years old, and it was 2%. And their conclusion was that creativity is actually unlearned.
Well, this has been an exciting panel, and I hope you will all join me in thanking this illustrious group.
our thank yous and getting ready to conclude, thank you, Johanna, for moderating that panel. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Chancellor Zimpher, who came here to be with us today. And especially thanks to all of you who came to join in this community-wide effort. That concludes our program.
Wish me well. Is Tony gonna be there too? Yes. Good for you guys.